Sarah watches him from across a coffee shop, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug that's gone cold. He hasn't looked up from his phone in 7 minutes. Not once. When he finally does, it's to show her a meme she doesn't find funny, and she laughs anyway because that's what she's learned to do. This is their third date, and already she can feel the familiar weight settling to her chest. The one that whispers she's seen this movie before and knows exactly how it ends. He'll text less, she'll wonder why. He'll say he's busy. She'll believe him until she doesn't. But here's what's strange. What she can't quite articulate even to herself. Last week, a different man held the door open for her, complimented her dress, asked all the right questions, and she felt absolutely nothing. Not a flutter, not a spark. Just the mechanical appreciation you'd give a well-trained customer service representative. The mathematics of attraction have never made sense. And if you're watching this expecting me to give you a blueprint, a simple formula, a list of 3 things to say and 5 things to wear, you're going to be disappointed. Because what I'm about to share with you goes against every instinct you have, contradicts every piece of advice your well-meaning friends have given you, and flies in the face of what 97% of men are doing right now, which is exactly why they're getting the same results they've always gotten. You see, there's a game being played, and most men don't even know they're playing it. They're like chess players who've memorized the first 4 moves but have no understanding of strategy, no comprehension of the deeper patterns that separate masters from amateurs. They buy the flowers, they send the good morning texts, they're available, eager, predictable, and then they sit in their apartments wondering why she's pulling away, why the passion faded, why she says she needs space. Marcus learned this the hard way. Successful guy, 6-figure salary, good looking enough, the kind of man who checks all the boxes on paper. He'd meet a woman, feel that initial spark, and then proceed to do everything the dating coaches tell you to do. He'd be attentive, he'd be consistent, he'd make his interest clear. And every single time, without fail, within 6 to 8 weeks, he'd watch her interest evaporate like morning fog. The texts would slow, the excuses would multiply, the warmth would cool into something polite and distant. He'd analyze the conversations, replay the dates, search for the moment he said the wrong thing or made the wrong move, but he could never find it. The frustration became a knot in his stomach that tightened with each new woman who followed the exact same pattern. What Marcus didn't understand, what most men don't understand, is that women are responding to something entirely different than what you think they're responding to. You think it's about being nice. It's not. You think it's about showing interest. It's not. You think it's about consistency and reliability and demonstrating that you're relationship material, and you'd be wrong on all 3 counts. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that no one wants to say out loud. The things that make you good boyfriend material are not the same things that make her feel that electric, consuming, can't stop thinking about you attraction. They're not even the same category. It's like confusing the ingredients for bread with the ingredients for wine. They're both valuable. They both have their place, but they create completely different experiences. Every woman has had this experience, even if she's never admitted it. Even if it makes her feel shallow or contradictory or confused about her own desires, she meets a man who treats her well, who's stable and kind, and would probably make an excellent partner, and she feels nothing. Or worse, she feels like she should feel something and beats herself up when she doesn't. Then she meets someone else, someone who's less available, less predictable, someone who frustrates her and confuses her and doesn't fit into any reasonable plan for her life, and suddenly she's alive in a way she can't explain or defend. She's checking her phone, she's analyzing every word, she's experiencing feelings with an intensity that almost frightens her. And if you asked her to explain why, she couldn't give you a logical answer because attraction doesn't operate in the realm of logic. The men who understand this, who've cracked this code, they move through the world differently. You can see it in the way they carry themselves, the way they interact with women, the complete absence of that needy, seeking energy that repels feminine desire like a magnetic force. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not auditioning for the role of boyfriend. They're not mentally calculating whether they've texted too much or too little, wondering if they should have said this instead of that, analyzing every interaction for signs of approval or rejection. They've stepped out of that anxious, approval-seeking frame entirely. And that shift, that fundamental reorientation of how they relate to women and to themselves, changes everything. But before we go deeper into what these men do differently, you need to understand why the conventional approach fails so spectacularly. You need to see the trap for what it is. Because right now, you're probably caught in it, and the worst part is, it feels like the right thing to do. It feels like you're being respectful and genuine, and all the things a good man should be. The culture has told you that the way to win a woman's heart is through consistent attention, clear communication of your feelings, and demonstrating your value as a long-term partner. And all of that sounds so reasonable, so enlightened, so emotionally mature, which is exactly why it doesn't work. Because you're speaking a language she's not wired to hear, at least not in the early stages, not when attraction is being formed or destroyed in those critical first interactions and weeks. Think about the last time you really wanted something you couldn't easily have. Maybe it was a career opportunity that seemed just out of reach, or a goal that required you to stretch beyond your comfort zone. Remember how alive you felt in the pursuit? How focused and energized and fully present? Now compare that to something that was simply handed to you, something you didn't have to work for, something that required no uncertainty, no challenge, no risk. Which one created more passion? Which one made you feel more alive? The answer is obvious. And yet, when it comes to dating, men seem to forget this fundamental principle of human psychology. They make themselves completely available, completely certain, completely safe, and then wonder why she's not feeling what they want her to feel. The woman sitting across from you at dinner, the one you're trying so hard to impress, she's been approached by available, eager men her entire adult life. If she's even moderately attractive, she's fielded countless messages from guys who made their interest crystal clear from the first interaction, who are ready to rearrange their entire schedule to accommodate her, who treated her attention like the prize they've been seeking their whole lives. And you know what happened to 99% of those men? They became background noise. They became the safe option she kept on the shelf while she obsessed over someone else. They became the friend, the backup plan, the guy she appreciated but didn't desire. Because you cannot create desire through availability and eagerness. You can create comfort, security, appreciation, but not that raw, visceral attraction that makes her heart race when she sees your name on her phone. Now here's where this gets interesting, where most men make their second critical mistake. They hear this and think the solution is to play games, to artificially create scarcity, to use techniques and tactics they found on some forum or dating app strategy guide. They'll wait exactly 3 hours before responding to a text. They'll deliberately cancel plans to appear busy. They'll throw in a backhanded compliment they read about in a pickup artist manual. And it fails just as spectacularly as the eager approach, because women can smell inauthenticity from a mile away. They've seen every trick, every technique, every calculated move, and their radar for manufactured behavior is more sophisticated than you can imagine. What actually works, what the men who truly understand this do, is something else entirely. It's not a technique. It's not a strategy you can fake until you make it. It's a fundamental shift in how you see yourself, how you see her, and how you navigate the entire dynamic between masculine and feminine energy. These men have stopped seeking validation through female attention. They've stopped using a woman's interest as a barometer for their own worth. They've developed such a strong internal frame, such a deep sense of their own value independent of external approval, that they genuinely don't need her to like them. And that's not reverse psychology or some clever tactic. That's the actual truth of how they move through the world. When you don't need her approval, when you're genuinely outcome independent, something shifts in the energy between you. She can feel it. She notices that you're not hanging on her every word, not laughing too hard at jokes that aren't funny, not agreeing with everything she says to avoid conflict or disapproval. You're willing to disagree. You're willing to challenge her. You're willing to walk away if the dynamic doesn't serve you. And counterintuitively, paradoxically, this makes her lean in. Because for the first time in a long time, she's met a man who isn't trying to earn his way into her life, who isn't auditioning for her affection, who seems perfectly content whether she's interested or not. This is what Marcus finally understood after his string of failures. He stopped trying to make women like him and started evaluating whether he actually liked them. He stopped being so available and started prioritizing his own life, his own goals, his own standards. When a woman would flake on plans, instead of immediately suggesting another time and reassuring her it was fine, he simply acknowledged it and move on. If she reached out again, great. If not, also great. His energy was no longer invested in the outcome, and the results were so dramatic, so immediate, that it almost scared him. Women who'd been lukewarm suddenly became interested. Women who'd been playing games suddenly became direct. The power dynamic had completely reversed, and he hadn't done anything except stop giving away his power in the first place. But we're just scratching the surface here. What I've described is the foundation, the shift in frame that makes everything else possible. Now we need to go deeper into the specific ways this plays out, the patterns of behavior that separate men who inspire genuine desire from men who inspire polite appreciation at best. Because the real secret, the thing that changes everything, is hiding in the space between what you say and what you don't say, between the attention you give and the attention you withhold, between being present and being preoccupied with your own compelling life. The art of creating attraction isn't about doing more. It's about doing less, but doing it with complete authenticity and self-possession. It's about understanding that every time you chase, you create distance. Every time you try too hard, you communicate that you don't believe you're enough. Every time you prioritize her feelings over your own boundaries, you teach her that your standards are negotiable. And women, whether they admit it consciously or not, are testing for this. They're testing to see if you're like every other man who crumbled when she withdrew a little attention, who rearranged his life around her schedule, who made her the center of his universe before she'd earned that place. The men who pass these tests, who maintain their frame when she pulls back or creates drama or tests his boundaries, they're the ones who haunt her thoughts. They're the ones she can't quite figure out. They're the ones who've activated something primal in her psychology, something that transcends logic and reason and all her carefully constructed ideas about what she wants in a partner. Because what she thinks she wants and what actually ignites her desire are often two completely different things, and understanding that distinction is the key to everything that follows. So here's what we're going to explore in depth. We're going to dismantle every assumption you have about how attraction works. We're going to look at the specific behaviors, the subtle shifts in communication, the ways you can become the exception to her pattern instead of another repetition of it. We're going to talk about the power of emotional variability, the strategic use of absence, the art of creating a reality she wants to be part of instead of making herself part of hers. And we're going to do it in a way that's not manipulative, not dishonest, but actually calls you to become a more authentic, powerful version of yourself. Because here's what they won't tell you, what the mainstream dating advice carefully avoids. Becoming the kind of man women genuinely desire requires you to care less about whether any individual woman desires you. It requires you to build a life so compelling, so full, so aligned with your actual values and ambitions that female attention becomes a nice addition rather than the main event. It requires you to develop standards that you won't compromise, boundaries that you won't negotiate, and a sense of self-worth that doesn't fluctuate based on her mood or responsiveness. And once you have that, once you've truly internalized that your value isn't up for debate or dependent on her validation, everything changes. The dynamic shifts, the power rebalances. And suddenly, you're no longer wondering how to make her fall in love with you. You're deciding whether she's worthy of the position in your life she's seeking. Let's talk about the first major shift that needs to happen, the one that underpins everything else. You need to stop viewing women as the price and start viewing your time, your energy, and your commitment as the price. Right now, if you're like most men, you've internalized a frame where female attention and affection are scarce resources that you need to earn through good behavior and sufficient displays of value. You've bought into the idea that if you just say the right things, show up in the right ways, demonstrate enough interest and consistency, eventually she'll choose you. And this frame, this fundamental orientation toward the dynamic, it destroys attraction before it has a chance to form. Women are extraordinarily sensitive to the energy of pursuit versus the energy of evaluation. When you're pursuing, when you're in that mode of trying to win her over, you're telegraphing that she's already won, that you've decided she's the prize before she's done anything to earn that status. And there's no faster way to kill her interest than to hand her a victory before the game has even started. Because attraction thrives in uncertainty. In the space where she doesn't quite know if she's captured your interest, where she has to work a little to get your attention, where your approval isn't a given but something she finds herself wanting to earn. The men who understand this, they interact with women from a fundamentally different frame. They're pleasant, they're engaging, but they're also evaluating. Is she interesting? Is she bringing value to the interaction? Does her presence enhance his life or just stroke his ego? These aren't questions they're asking consciously and awkwardly. It's the natural filter through which they perceive the world. They've internalized that their time is finite and precious, that there are opportunity costs to investing in any particular person, and that settling for mediocre company is worse than being alone. This shift manifests in small but powerful ways. When she tests him with unreasonable behavior, he doesn't scramble to accommodate or rationalize it. He addresses it directly or walks away without drama. When she cancels plans, he doesn't immediately offer alternatives and reassure her it's fine. He accepts her cancellation and makes other plans, sending a clear message that his schedule doesn't revolve around her availability. When she withdraws attention to see if he'll chase, he matches her energy or decreases his own, refusing to play the game of pursuing someone who's not enthusiastically engaged. These aren't techniques to be mechanically applied. They're the natural behaviors that emerge when you genuinely value yourself and your time. And women recognize this instantly because it's so rare. They're used to men who tolerate disrespect, accept crumbs of attention, and convince themselves that inconsistent behavior is just her being busy or complicated or worth the effort. When they encounter a man who clearly won't accept less than genuine interest and respect, it scrambles their usual playbook. Suddenly, they're the ones wondering if they're doing enough, if they're interesting enough, if they're going to lose access to someone who seems perfectly content without them. Now, let's address the second critical element, the one that might make you uncomfortable because it goes against everything the modern world tells you about relationships. You need to maintain an element of emotional distance and unpredictability, especially in the early stages. Notice I said emotional distance, not coldness or cruelty. You can be warm, engaging, present in the moment, but you're not emotionally investing at the level she is. You're not making her your entire focus, and you're not becoming predictable in your availability or responsiveness. Most men, once they meet a woman they like, they become an open book. They're consistent to the point of being boring. They text at the same times, respond with the same speed, show up with the same energy. They eliminate all mystery, all uncertainty, all tension from the dynamic. And tension is the electricity that makes attraction live and breathe. Without it, you have comfort, familiarity, safety, all the ingredients for a nice friendship or a passionless relationship, but not the consuming desire that makes her think about you when she should be focused on other things. The men who keep her interest, they create emotional variability. Sometimes they're very engaged, present, creating moments of intense connection. Other times, they're preoccupied with their own lives, less available, creating space that makes her wonder and reach out. This isn't game playing for its own sake. This is a natural rhythm of a man who has a full, compelling life beyond any individual woman. His attention fluctuates based on genuine factors, his work, his goals, his other interests, and she has to fit into that reality rather than him reshaping his reality around her. This variability creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior and emotional investment. When rewards are consistent and predictable, we value them less. When they're variable and uncertain, we become more invested in obtaining them. Every casino in the world is built on this principle. And while I'm not suggesting you treat relationships like gambling, the underlying psychology is relevant. A man who's always available, always responsive, always eager, he's given her complete certainty. There's no challenge, no mystery, no reason for her mind to obsess over where she stands or when she'll next experience his full attention. Compare this to the man whose attention feels earned, whose time feels valuable, whose full presence feels like something special rather than something guaranteed. When he does create those moments of connection, they land with more impact because they stand in contrast to his general self-possession and independence. She finds herself looking forward to seeing him, not because she's afraid of losing him, but because time with him feels different from the accessible, eager energy most men bring. He's created scarcity through authenticity, not through manipulation. The third element, and this is where most men completely miss the mark, is the willingness to create and maintain tension through disagreement and challenge. The typical male approach to a woman he likes is agreement and accommodation. He doesn't want to risk conflict or disagreement, so he nods along with her opinions, laughs at things that aren't funny, and suppresses his own viewpoints that might create friction. He thinks he's being agreeable and easy to be with. What he's actually doing is neutering any masculine edge and making himself forgettable. Women don't respect men they can steamroll. They don't desire men who have no strong opinions or who sacrifice those opinions to avoid ruffling feathers. They want to feel your edges, your boundaries, your willingness to stand firm in who you are, even when it creates temporary discomfort. This doesn't mean being argumentative or contrarian for its own sake. It means being authentically yourself and not smoothing down your rough edges to make yourself more palatable. When she says something you disagree with humor and confidence. When she tests a boundary, hold it without being reactive or angry. When she expects you to accommodate something that doesn't work for you, politely decline without over-explaining or apologizing. These moments of gentle friction create respect, and respect is the foundation on which attraction builds. A woman might enjoy the company of a man who agrees with everything, but she won't desire him. She won't lie awake thinking about him. She won't feel that pull in her chest when she sees him, because he's eliminated the masculine polarity that creates sexual tension. The men who inspire genuine desire, they create this polarity naturally because they're not afraid of her disapproval. They're not walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect. They're fully present in their masculine frame, which sometimes aligns with her energy and sometimes creates productive friction. And that dynamic, that push and pull, that's where attraction lives. It lives in the space between comfort and challenge, between harmony and productive tension, between feeling safe and feeling slightly off balance in the best possible way. Here's the fourth shift that changes everything. You need to have a vision for your life that's bigger than any relationship. Most men, if they're honest, are living relatively small lives. They go to work, they come home, they scroll their phones, they hang out with the same friends doing the same things, and when the woman enters the picture, she becomes the most interesting thing happening to them. Their relationship becomes their hobby, their entertainment, their primary source of emotional stimulation. And she can feel this. She can sense that she's become the main event in his life, and it's suffocating. Women are attracted to ambition, drive, purpose, the sense that a man is going somewhere and building something that matters to him. They want to be pulled into the orbit of a compelling life, not tasked with being the entire source of a man's fulfillment and direction. When you have genuine goals that excite you, projects that consume your focus, a vision you're actively building toward, your energy changes. You're not available all the time because you're genuinely busy. You're not overthinking the relationship because you have other things demanding your mental bandwidth. You are not making her the center of your universe because your universe has multiple centers of gravity. This isn't about pretending to be busy or artificially creating the appearance of an interesting life. This is about actually building something worth building. Maybe it's a business, a creative project, a fitness goal, a skill you are mastering, a community you are contributing to. Whatever it is, it needs to be real and genuinely important to you. Because when it's real, when she can see you light up talking about your work or your goals, When she notices you occasionally choose your priorities over time with her, she recognizes she's with a man who has substance beyond his ability to be a good boyfriend. And here's the paradox that confuses most men. When you make her less central to your life, you often become more central to hers. When you have other things that genuinely matter to you, your attention becomes more valuable because it's not infinite and freely given. She has to share space with your ambitions, and that creates a subtle competition for your time and focus that keeps her invested. She's not competing with other women necessarily. She's competing with the compelling life you're building, and that's a competition that actually increases her respect and desire rather than triggering insecurity. The fifth element is perhaps the most counterintuitive. You need to be comfortable with her walking away. Most men are operating from a scarcity mindset where this particular woman represents a rare opportunity they can't afford to lose. Maybe they don't meet women often. Maybe they've been single for a while. Maybe she's more attractive than women they usually date. Whatever the reason, they're gripping too tightly, afraid that if they don't do everything right, she'll disappear, and it'll be months or years before another opportunity comes along. This fear is palpable. She can feel it in how quickly you respond to texts, how available you make yourself, how careful you are not to say anything that might create distance. And this fear is attraction poison. Because the subtext underneath all that careful behavior is that you don't believe you can attract another woman of her caliber, which means she's settling if she chooses you. Your own behavior is communicating that she's out of your league. The men who truly succeed with women, they've internalized abundance, not because they're dating multiple women simultaneously, necessarily, but because they genuinely believe that if this doesn't work out, they'll be fine. They'll meet someone else. They'll enjoy being single. They'll continue building their lives. They're not attached to any particular outcome with any particular woman because their sense of self and their quality of life isn't dependent on relationship status. This shows up as a relaxed confidence that's incredibly attractive. They can enjoy getting to know her without the desperate undertone of needing it to work out. They can walk away from disrespect or incompatibility without second-guessing themselves. They can let her go if she's not enthusiastically choosing them, because they'd rather be alone than in a mediocre dynamic. And ironically, this willingness to walk away often prevents them from having to, because women recognize and respond to a man who isn't going to tolerate less than genuine interest and respect. Now we're going to talk about the element that ties all of this together, the meta skill that makes everything else work. You need to develop such strong self-awareness and emotional regulation that you can maintain your frame regardless of what she does. Most men are reactive. When she's warm and engaged, they get excited and lean in harder. When she pulls back or creates distance, they panic and start chasing. Their energy is constantly fluctuating in response to her energy, which puts her in the driver's seat and makes him exhausting to be around. The men who maintain attraction over time, they're remarkably stable in their frame. They don't get overly excited when things are going well, and they don't get anxious when she's distant or testing. They maintain a steady, grounded presence that becomes the emotional anchor in the dynamic. This doesn't mean being emotionless or unavailable. It means your emotional state isn't dependent on her mood or behavior. You're happy to connect when she's available and engaged, and you're perfectly content focusing on your own life when she's not. This emotional stability is incredibly attractive because it signals maturity and self-possession. It tells her that you're not going to be a project that requires her constant emotional management. It shows her that you can handle the natural ebbs and flows of human connection without making it a crisis or taking it personally. And perhaps most importantly, it creates a safe container for her own emotional variability. She can have a bad day, be stressed about work, need some space, and trust that you're not going to interpret it as rejection or punish her for having a full emotional life. Women are constantly testing, whether consciously or unconsciously, to see if you're going to maintain your frame or if you're going to crumble when she withdraws a little warmth. The test isn't meant to be cruel. It's an adaptive mechanism to screen for emotional strength and stability. She needs to know that the man she's considering investing in can handle pressure, uncertainty, and the full range of her emotional expression without falling apart. Every time you pass one of these tests by remaining calm, outcome independent, and grounded in yourself, you're building trust and attraction simultaneously. Let's get specific about what this looks like in practice. She doesn't respond to your text for several hours. Most men will send a follow-up, make a joke about being ignored, or worse, ask if everything's okay. These responses all communicate anxiety and need. The man who understands frame simply continues with his day and responds when she eventually replies, matching or slightly decreasing her energy level. No commentary, no passive-aggressive remarks, just a continuation of the interaction as if the delay was completely unremarkable. She cancels plans at the last minute. Most men will immediately suggest alternative times and reassure her it's totally fine, sending the message that their time isn't valuable and they're just grateful for whatever scraps of attention she offers. The man with strong frame acknowledges the cancellation briefly, makes other plans, and doesn't bring it up again unless she proactively reschedules. If it becomes a pattern, he addresses it directly or simply stops making plans, letting his actions communicate his boundaries without needing to explain or justify them. She creates drama or picks a fight over something minor. Most men will either escalate by getting defensive or collapse by apologizing for things they didn't do wrong. Neither response is attractive. The man who maintains frame stays calm, refuses to engage with manufactured drama, and if necessary, creates space until she's ready to communicate like an adult. He's not controlling her behavior, but he is controlling what he'll participate in and what he won't tolerate. These aren't manipulation tactics. These are the natural behaviors of a man who respects himself enough to have boundaries and standards. And women find this incredibly attractive because it's so rare. They're used to men who bend themselves into pretzels to avoid conflict or losing access to female attention. When they meet a man who clearly has a line that won't be crossed, who's willing to walk away rather than compromise his self-respect, it triggers something primal in their psychology. The final piece of this puzzle, the element that makes all the difference between short-term attraction and genuine love, is this. While you're maintaining all the frame and standards and self-possession we've discussed, you also need to create moments of genuine vulnerability and connection. This seems contradictory, but it's not. The strong frame, the boundaries, the independence, these create attraction and respect. But love requires depth, authenticity, the sense that she's accessing parts of you that aren't available to everyone else. The men who truly understand this dynamic know when to maintain their masculine frame and when to let her in. They're not vulnerable in a weak, oversharing way that makes them an emotional burden. They're selectively vulnerable in moments of genuine connection, sharing their struggles, their fears, their real thoughts about things that matter. This vulnerability is powerful precisely because it's rare and earned, because it stands in contrast to their usual self-possessed demeanor. This is where most dating advice fails. It tells you to either be a rock who never shows emotion or to be open and communicative about everything. Both extremes miss the mark. You want to be primarily grounded and emotionally stable, but with moments of deeper sharing that create intimacy. You want her to feel like she's seeing a side of you that the world doesn't get to see, that she's earned access to your inner world through her own investment and respect. When you combine all of these elements, when you're truly living from this frame, something magical happens. You stop trying to make women fall in love with you, and you start naturally inspiring that response through who you are and how you move through the world. You're not performing or using techniques. You're embodying a way of being that's attractive because it's grounded in genuine self-respect, purpose, and emotional maturity. The woman who falls in love with this version of you, she's falling in love with something real. She's not being manipulated into an emotional state that will collapse when you can't maintain the performance. She's responding to the authentic reality of a man who values himself, who's building something meaningful, who has standards, and who's emotionally stable enough to create a container for real intimacy. That's the kind of attraction that lasts, that deepens over time rather than fading, that transforms into genuine love rather than dissolving into disappointment. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't a quick fix or a shortcut. You can't fake your way into this frame. You have to actually become this person, which means doing the work of building a life you're proud of, developing genuine self-respect, confronting your neediness and scarcity mindset, and learning to be comfortable with uncertainty and the possibility of being alone. Most men aren't willing to do this work. They want the results without the transformation. They want a technique they can apply without changing who they fundamentally are. And that's why most men keep getting the same results they've always gotten. The path I'm describing requires you to challenge every comfortable assumption you have about how attraction works. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of not chasing, not over-explaining, not seeking constant reassurance. It requires you to build enough genuine value in your own life that female attention becomes a nice addition rather than the main source of your fulfillment. And yes, it requires you to be willing to let women walk away if they're not treating you with the respect and enthusiasm you deserve. But the reward for this work, for this transformation, is not just better results with women. It's a fundamentally better life. It's waking up excited about your own day regardless of your relationship status. It's interacting with people from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. It's experiencing the deep satisfaction that comes from living according to your own standards rather than contorting yourself to meet someone else's expectations. The romantic success is almost a side effect of becoming the kind of man who's built something worth building and who won't compromise that for anyone. So if you're serious about this, if you're tired of the same patterns producing the same disappointing results, you have a choice to make. You can continue doing what most men do, being available and eager and hoping that eventually some woman will appreciate it enough to stick around. Or you can do the harder, more rewarding work of becoming the exception, the man who stands out precisely because he's not doing what everyone else is doing, who creates attraction through authentic self-possession rather than through techniques and tactics. The women you want, the ones who are beautiful and intelligent and have options. They're not looking for another nice guy who'll rearrange his life around them. They've got plenty of those. They're looking for something rare, a man who's so grounded in his own value and purpose that their presence in his life feels like a privilege that needs to be earned rather than a gift he's desperately trying to hold on to. Become that man, and you won't have to figure out how to make women fall in love with you. They'll fall in love with who you've become, and it'll be the most natural thing in the world. Everything I've shared with you today goes against the grain of what you've been taught, what your friends tell you, what the mainstream dating culture promotes, and that's exactly why it works. Because most men are following the same playbook, getting the same mediocre results, wondering why their genuine interest and effort isn't creating the connection they want. You now understand why. You understand the frame that needs to shift, the behaviors that need to change, the man you need to become. But understanding isn't enough. You have to take this information and actually implement it in your life. You have to catch yourself in the moment when you're about to send that overeager text and choose differently. You have to notice when you're compromising your boundaries to avoid conflict and hold firm instead. You have to build actual value in your life rather than just hoping a woman will provide that value for you. This is uncomfortable work. It requires you to sit with uncertainty, to risk rejection, to bet on yourself when it would be easier to just keep doing what's familiar. If this resonates with you, if you're ready to stop being the guy she appreciates but doesn't desire and become the man she can't stop thinking about, then I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button because this is just the beginning of what we're going to explore together. I'm going to be breaking down the specific dynamics, the communication patterns, the mindset shifts that separate men who inspire genuine desire from men who end up in the friend zone or in passionless relationships. Like this video if you found value in what I've shared, because it tells me you're ready for the deeper truth rather than comfortable lies. And drop a comment telling me what part of this hit home for you, what you were going to implement first, what you're struggling with most. I read every comment, and your engagement helps me create content that serves you better. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it, who's stuck in the same patterns, wondering why his efforts aren't translating into the results he wants. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do for someone is show them a different perspective, challenge their assumptions, give them permission to stop trying so hard and start being more of who they actually are. This information has the power to transform not just your dating life, but your entire relationship with yourself and how you move through the world. Don't let it stop with you. The journey from where you are to where you want to be, it starts with a decision to stop settling for mediocrity and start demanding more from yourself and from the people you allow into your life. It starts with recognizing that every interaction where you compromised yourself, where you chased when you should have walked away, where you accepted disrespect because you were afraid of being alone, those weren't failures of the women you were pursuing. Those were failures of your own frame, your own standards, your own willingness to settle for crumbs because you didn't believe you deserved the whole meal. Marcus, the guy I mentioned earlier, he went through this exact transformation. After his pattern of failed relationships, after watching yet another woman he'd invested in emotionally drift away into the arms of someone who treated her with less consistency and care, he hit a breaking point. Not the angry, bitter kind where men blame women and retreat into resentment, the productive kind where he looked in the mirror and asked himself the hard question, what am I doing that keeps producing this result? And when he was honest with himself, brutally honest, he realized he'd been living his entire dating life from a place of scarcity and fear. He was afraid that if he didn't text back immediately, she'd lose interest. He was afraid that if he didn't accommodate her schedule completely, she'd find someone more flexible. He was afraid that if he expressed his real opinions or held firm boundaries, she'd see him as difficult and move on. So he'd been playing small, making himself easy and convenient and inoffensive, and wondering why that strategy kept producing women who valued him the way you value a comfortable pair of shoes, appreciated when needed, but never exciting, never the object of genuine desire. The shift for Marcus started with something small but significant. A woman he'd been seeing casually texted to cancel their plans for the third time in 2 weeks, offering a vague excuse about being overwhelmed with work. The old Marcus would have immediately responded with understanding, suggested 3 alternative times, maybe even offered to bring her dinner since she was so stressed. The new Marcus, the one who was committed to valuing his own time and standards, simply replied, "No worries," and made plans with friends instead. He didn't explain that he was disappointed. He didn't try to reschedule. He just accepted her cancellation and moved on with his life. What happened next surprised him. She texted him 2 days later asking when they could get together, not suggesting a time, asking when he was available, which was a subtle but important shift in the dynamic. He didn't respond immediately. He checked his actual calendar, saw he had plans for the next few days that mattered to him, and suggested a time that worked for his schedule without apology or explanation. She agreed enthusiastically and showed up to that date more engaged, more present, more interested than she'd been in any of their previous interactions. The energy had completely shifted because he stopped chasing and started evaluating. That one interaction taught Marcus something crucial. Women respond to what you do, not what you say. He could have spent an hour explaining that he valued his time and had standards, and it would have meant nothing. But by simply acting like a man whose time was valuable, by refusing to chase or accommodate bad behavior, he communicated everything that needed to be communicated. And more importantly, he felt different. He felt the self-respect that comes from honoring your own boundaries, the quiet confidence that emerges when you're willing to walk away from something that doesn't serve you. He started applying this principle everywhere in his dating life. When women would send low-effort messages, he'd match that energy instead of trying to carry the conversation. When someone would be consistently late, he'd address it once directly and then make decisions about whether he wanted to continue seeing someone who didn't respect his time. When he'd notice himself getting overly invested in someone who was showing lukewarm interest, he'd consciously redirect that energy into his own goals and other social connections. And the results were so consistent, so predictable, that it stopped feeling like strategy and started feeling like just how the world works. The women who were genuinely interested, who had the capacity for healthy dynamics, they responded beautifully to his new frame. They appreciated having a man with actual standards. They were attracted to his self-possession. They invested more because they could sense he wasn't going to accept less than genuine enthusiasm. The women who were playing games, who were used to men chasing while they remained passive, they either stepped up their investment or drifted away. And Marcus learned to see the ones who drifted away as the trash taking itself out rather than as romantic failures. But here's what's crucial to understand about Marcus's transformation. It wasn't about becoming cold or calculating or manipulative. He didn't start treating women badly or playing games. He just stopped betraying himself to make himself more palatable to people who weren't treating him with respect and genuine interest. He started living from a place of authenticity and self-respect, and that shift in his internal world created a completely different external reality. This is the distinction most men miss when they hear this information. They think the solution is to become aloof or to use absence as a manipulation tactic or to deliberately create drama and uncertainty. And those approaches fail because they're built on the same fundamental frame of neediness and scarcity, just expressed differently. You're still operating from a place of trying to control her response rather than genuinely being outcome independent. You're still making her opinion of you more important than your own standards and boundaries. True transformation happens when you internalize that your value isn't up for debate. When you understand at a bone-deep level that you bring something significant to any relationship you enter, and that investing your time and energy in someone is a gift that needs to be earned and reciprocated. When you reach the point where being single sounds better than being in a mediocre relationship, where you genuinely rather walk away than compromise your core standards, where you're so focused on building your own life that romantic relationships become something you're open to but not desperately seeking. This is the frame that the top tier of men, the ones who consistently attract high-quality women and maintain their interest over time, they all share this orientation. They're not trying to figure out how to make women like them. They're evaluating whether the women they meet enhance their lives and meet their standards. They're not anxious about whether she's going to text back because they're genuinely busy with things that matter to them. They're not overthinking the relationship because they trust themselves to make good decisions and walk away from bad dynamic. And women can sense this frame immediately. It's in the way these men carry themselves, the way they speak, the way they make decisions. There's a certainty, a groundedness, an absence of that seeking, needy energy that repels attraction. When you're in conversation with them, you get the sense that they're fully present, but also completely comfortable with silence, that they're enjoying the interaction but not attached to its outcome, that they like you but would be fine if you decided you weren't interested. This creates a completely different dynamic than what most women experience with men. Instead of being pursued and having to manage a man's expectations and ego, she finds herself wanting to earn more of his time and attention. Instead of feeling pressured or like she's being sold on the relationship, she feels like she's being given the opportunity to be part of something and needs to demonstrate that she deserves that place. The power dynamic doesn't flip in an unhealthy way where now she's chasing and you're cruel about it. It balances in a healthy way where both people are choosing each other from a place of genuine interest rather than need or scarcity. Let me give you another concrete example of how this plays out. James had been dating a woman for about 6 weeks. Things were going well, they had chemistry, they enjoyed each other's company, but he noticed she had a habit of making plans and then changing them at the last minute to something she preferred. They'd agreed to try a new restaurant and she'd text an hour before suggesting somewhere else. They'd plan a hike and she called that morning wanting to just hang out at her place instead. Small things individually, but a pattern that communicated she expected him to be flexible while she got to control the agenda. The old James would have accommodated every time, telling himself it was about being easygoing and that the specific activity didn't matter as long as they were together. But James had been working on his frame, and he recognized this pattern for what it was, a test of his boundaries, an indication that she didn't fully respect his time and preferences. So the next time she tried to change plans last minute, he said something that changed everything. "I was looking forward to what we planned. If that doesn't work for you anymore, no worries, but I'm going to stick with the original plan. You're welcome to join if you change your mind." Her response was telling. There was a moment of surprise, maybe a flash of annoyance that he wasn't immediately accommodating, and then something shifted. She paused, reconsidered, and said she'd stick with the original plan. And from that point forward, she stopped trying to change plans last minute. More importantly, her overall respect and investment in the relationship increased noticeably. James had demonstrated that he had standards and boundaries, that his preferences mattered, that he wasn't going to be the infinitely flexible partner who accommodated her every whim. This is what boundaries look like in practice. Not aggressive or angry or punitive, just calm and clear about what you will and won't accept. Most men are terrified of setting boundaries because they think it'll push women away. And yes, it will push away women who are looking for someone they can control or who don't have the capacity for respectful dynamics. But it draws in and deepens connection with women who are capable of healthy relationships, who actually respect a man with standards, who are turned on by masculine strength that doesn't bend to every test and challenge. Every healthy relationship you've ever observed, if you look closely, you'll see a man who maintained his frame and a woman who respects him for it. You'll see someone who didn't lose himself in the relationship, who kept his own interests and friendships and goals, who was willing to disagree and hold boundaries when necessary. And you'll see a woman who's more attracted to him, more invested, more happy than she would be with someone who made her the center of his universe and expected her to fill all the empty spaces in his life. Because here's the truth that sounds harsh, but is actually liberating. Women don't want to be your entire world. They don't want that responsibility. They don't want to be the only source of your happiness and fulfillment and purpose. It's too much pressure, and it's fundamentally unattractive because it signals that you don't have anything else going on, that you're not building anything meaningful, that you need her rather than choose her. The women who end up in passionate, long-term relationships, they're with men who have full lives that the woman enhances but doesn't define. This is why building your purpose, your mission, your compelling life, independent of romantic relationships, isn't just dating strategy. It's the foundation of masculine attractiveness and the prerequisite for healthy relationships. When you have something you're building that genuinely excites you, that challenges you, that gives you a sense of progress and accomplishment, your entire energy changes. You're not looking to a woman to validate you or make your life interesting. You're inviting her to join something that's already interesting, to be part of a journey that's already compelling. Think about the difference in these two frames. Man A meets a woman and starts building his schedule around her availability, making her his primary source of entertainment and emotional connection, thinking about the relationship constantly and analyzing every interaction for signs of approval or rejection. Man B meets a woman and fits her into a life that's already full and purposeful, enjoys her company when they're together but doesn't obsess when they're apart, maintains his focus on his goals and interests while being open to where the relationship develops. Which man do you think she's more attracted to? Which man is she thinking about more? Which man has created a dynamic where she's wondering about him, wanting more of his time, feeling like she needs to invest more to secure her place in his life? The answer is obvious. And yet, most men are operating like man A and wondering why they keep getting friend-zoned or ending up in passionless relationships where the woman seems increasingly distant and disengaged. The work you need to do, the transformation that makes all of this possible, it happens in the space between who you are now and who you're capable of becoming. It happens when you start making decisions based on self-respect rather than fear of being alone. It happens when you walk away from your first situation that doesn't meet your standards, even though it's scary and uncertain. It happens when you start building something in your life that matters more to you than any individual woman's approval. It happens in 1,000 small moments where you choose differently than you've chosen before. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, you'll have moments of doubt where you wonder if you're being too picky or too rigid or sabotaging good opportunities. Yes, you'll have to sit with the uncertainty of not knowing if she's going to reach out again, if you've pushed too hard on a boundary, if you're going to end up alone. But on the other side of that discomfort is a version of yourself that you actually respect, that women will genuinely desire, that moves through the world with quiet confidence rather than anxious seeking. The women you want, they're not going to fall in love with techniques or tactics. They're going to fall in love with a man who's become someone worth falling in love with, who's built a life worth being part of, who treats himself with enough respect that they feel safe investing their own respect and desire. Become that man. And the question isn't how to make women fall in love with you. The question becomes which woman deserves the position in your life she's seeking. And that's a much better question to be asking. This is your moment of decision. You can close this video and go back to doing what you've always done, hoping that somehow the results will be different next time. Or you can commit right now to the uncomfortable work of transformation, to building genuine value in your life, to developing the frame and standards that separate men who inspire desire from men who inspire polite appreciation at best. The choice has always been yours. The power has always been in your hands. It's time to stop giving that power away and start using it to create the life and relationships you actually want. Everything starts now. Everything changes when you decide it changes. Make that decision and never look back.